Welcome everyone to the next webinar in the Amplify series. This time we are going to be talking about sustainable transport. And we are very pleased to be inviting Michael from Campaign for Better Transport to come and talk to us about better transport for better business and the toolkit that they've developed for businesses to be able to engage more with public transport and transport in their local areas. Before we start our webinar, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about Amplify. Amplify was started by Pete Kenyon, a partner at Cripps Law Firm, and Jenny Kitchen, who runs a brand and digital agency called Yo-Yo. They both started to take their businesses through the B Corp process and decided that they wanted to take more action in the community. So created this business network called Amplify with a goal to build a community for positive action on climate change and to help businesses to reduce their carbon footprint. Amplify is not for profit to help businesses to reduce their carbon footprint and focuses on 5 key areas: learning, measuring, so helping businesses to measure their emissions and with a goal to reducing them, collaborating with different working groups and different sectors, taking action through education and helping businesses to understand how they can make a difference in their community, and sharing this information through sustainability stories and action and information such as webinars such as this and in-person events. If you'd like to find out more about Amplify and what we're doing, you can visit the website amplify.tw. Michael is the head of campaigns at Campaign for Better Transport. As an advocate for the public and transport industry, he works to put sustainable transport at the heart of society through collaboration with local and national policymakers. Recently, Michael's co-authored a report on the Channel Tunnel, which will be of interest to those in the Kent County, as it demonstrates its significant business and economic potential for the region and beyond. And so without further ado, I'd love to hand over to Michael, who is going to tell us more about the Campaign for Better Transport and their business toolkit, which is aimed at small businesses and transport in general. So, Michael, please go ahead.
Thank you, Christina. It's a great pleasure to join Amplify for this webinar. My name is Michael Solomon Williams. I'm head of campaigns at Campaign for Better Transport. We have been around since 1973, believe it or not. We were founded back in those days under a different name, Transport 2000, and for perhaps obvious reasons, we changed our name after the year 2000, in 2007 indeed, to become Campaign for Better Transport. We are the leading national charity for sustainable transport and the only one which covers all modes. We've been an authoritative voice on policy development and public campaigning for over 50 years now. And our vision is for all communities to have access to high quality, sustainable transport that meets their needs, improves quality of life and protects the environment. So we produce evidence-based solutions for better transport. That covers everything from rail reform, a big topic at the moment, of course, to bus funding provision and infrastructure, to local transport issues, rail fares and ticketing, modal shift, that's from one mode to another, from driving to taking the train, walking and other things, and decarbonisation, of course. While we've covered a lot of ground over the years, some of our more recent campaign successes include persuading the last Transport Secretary, but one, to introduce a £2 bus fare cap 3 times. That was a hugely welcome and successful national programme. We advised Nottingham on its groundbreaking workplace parking levy that we'll come back to. We have advocated for a national bus stop standard, which is extremely welcome at the moment by the Department for Transport. We've made the case for railway station and line reopenings, which has been successful again in the last year with the Northumberland line on the northeast coast opening up and the Dartmoor line a couple of years previously. We've managed effectively to turn a corner from a situation in 1973 where we were having less rail, less sustainable transport to slightly more with rail. The situation on buses is not so rosy, but we've turned a corner on rail and we're working hard to turn a corner on buses and indeed other modes, which includes trams, walking, wheeling and cycling. We also quite recently saved the day travel card, and I'm calling it the day travel card because it's not really the London day travel card. It's for people who travel in and out of London, and that certainly includes those who live in Tunbridge Wells. And that was a great success and an example of the way that we can do long-term things, such as guiding bus funding legislation, as well as short-term things. That was quite a short process. The Transport for London were due to cut the London day travel card to save 40 million quid. We managed to get the Mayor of London around the table with the Department for Transport and the Railway Delivery Group. We used people around London, that's including in Tunbridge Wells, Kent, Surrey and elsewhere, to write in to pressurise the Transport Secretary, and we used council voices, and we managed to save this day travel card for people coming in and out of London, used by 14 million people a year, including disabled groups, including young people's groups and elderly users as well. So that was a great example of short-term success and balancing some of our longer-term policy guidance. So our research impact, as I've alluded to, does have a direct impact on policy development. And here's an example of some of it. Runways to railways, that's the report which Christina just mentioned, unlocking the potential of the Channel Tunnel, very much of pertinence to those in Tunbridge Wells. Fair Future, a rail fares and ticketing blueprint, Pay As You Drive, which is the British public's view of road user charging, something which has been due to happen for a long time, but is politically slightly challenging and, if you like, toxic, but actually the public, when they get into the details, understand fair charging for different forms of transport. In fact, connecting communities and left behind neighbourhoods. This was a really, really impactful report on transport-related social exclusion, if you like, those places which don't have requisite access to public transport. Transport Deserts was a similar report on the impact of that and expansion of the railways in 2017. That's one of many pieces of work we've done on railway network expansion. As I mentioned, it's great to see the results of that now with things like Northumberland Line and Dartmoor Line. So in 2023, we produced our business travel toolkit called Better Transport for Better Business. Here it is being launched at the Federation of Small Businesses, the FSB in London. So you all know this, which is why you're members of Amplifi, of course, but this is what we're going to get into today, sustainable transport. Access to good quality transport networks is essential for all businesses, whether a market trader or a multinational bank. While road infrastructure is important for the movement of people and goods, having access to sustainable transport options, that's public transport, walking, wheeling and cycling infrastructure and shared transport, which we'll get into today, offers potential for growth in a huge variety of very important ways. And that includes access to labour, of course. The better the transport links, the larger the pool of labour for businesses to hire from. Employees also have a greater access to jobs with more organisations within a wider area. This drives up standards and competition, creates a higher skilled workforce and drives faster economic growth. Businesses understand that location matters, and indeed almost 60% of UK firms consider transport infrastructure as a major influence on their business location. Then retaining talent. With a labour market that's ever more flexible, international and capable of accessing a wide range of opportunities, business location is also paramount in attracting and retaining employees. Given that 77% of job seekers in the UK do not have access to a car, and ethnic minorities are also less likely to drive, good public transport access and promoting lift sharing, for example, are particularly important in attracting a diverse workforce, encouraging better equality of opportunity and promoting social mobility. Younger people and others who are increasingly prioritising sustainability in the context of a global climate crisis also really value businesses which encourage sustainable transport choices, either through their location or through their policies, or both. Then there's employee well-being. Public transport, lift sharing and active travel offer direct benefits for physical and mental health, in turn resulting in happier and more productive staff. Having more active employees leads to increased productivity, higher morale and lower turnover for the employer. Actively promoting healthier travel options in the workplace reduces absenteeism by up to 20%. We know that people who are physically active take 27% fewer sick days each year, and in addition, 54% of people who cycle to work feel happy and energised during their commute, more than any other mode. We also have journey time savings. One double-decker bus can take 75 cars off the road, and one freight train can remove up to 129 lorries from busy motorways. So the more that people and goods are moved by efficient, high-capacity modes, the more it reduces congestion. This improves journey time reliability and creates time saving for businesses, which can then fit in more jobs in a day. And finally, access to customers. Good public transport, walking and cycling connections and an improved public realm actually attract more customers. Many businesses, particularly high street retailers, believe that car access and parking provision are paramount for customers. But in actual fact, customers really prioritise better road crossings and less traffic. Studies have shown that shoppers on foot can spend up to 6 times more than those who arrive by car. And when streets are regenerated to boost walking, there's a corresponding impact on turnover, property values and rental yields. So well-designed improvements can boost footfall and trading by up to 40%. So better transport is better for investment. We know that better transport makes a direct contribution to the economy, increases, as I've mentioned, productive use of time, job creation, environmental benefits, value for money, and has manifold health and social benefits. Just to make sure that we remember, I'm sure everybody as a member of Amplifi is aware of the extreme disparity in terms of emissions between one transport mode and another, but that pie chart, I think, is quite a good reminder of the extreme difference between those modes. We have to struggle to find rail in there. It's that light blue one. 1.5% of transport emissions by mode come from rail. Walking, wheeling, and cycling falls into other. It's barely visible. And then, of course, we see the huge emissions impact of cars, taxis, lorries, and vans. So we want to do all we can just to remind ourselves to make that shift. We call it modal shift, going from one mode to another. Better transport, of course, is better value for money. We see the relative impact of investment on different types of transport. So if you have £1.14, which is gains from every pound spent on major road schemes, it's much more from other modes, as you can see, rail, bus, and walking, wheeling, and cycling. Then productive use of time for you and your employees. You'll get much more productivity out of your employees if they're able to use sustainable transport. Stuck in traffic, sat behind the wheel of a car, it's not great for productive use of time, and nor is it great for health, as I've mentioned. And then those health and social benefits. Of course, there's a direct link proportionally between different modes of transport and health and social benefits. We really want to be encouraging for everybody's benefit and more sustainable modes of transport. Job creation I've alluded to. We can see the some key figures there in terms of jobs created in the rail sector and the fall in employment deprivation from an increase in local bus connectivity, and the employed staff in the cycling industry, I should say, pretty promising at the moment. That could increase 64,000 construction jobs created by RIS2, that's the Road Investment Strategy over 5 years, is not as impressive proportionally as what can be created in other sectors. So what do you do as businesses to action some of the recommendations in our Better Transport Toolkit? I'm going to go through some of those recommendations for practical actions. But first of all, what I suggest you do is do a health check. Look at what you're already doing. Is there a travel policy in place? Do you measure your ESG, that's your environmental, social, and governance impacts in that travel policy? Do you offer any travel-related employee benefits? So do a survey. Find out how your employees get to and from work. What obstacles might stop them from using more sustainable transport modes? And then use a carbon calculator. There are lots of those available online that you could use to calculate the impact of your travel choices, of your employers' travel choices and patterns at the moment. You can then, of course, key that into Tunbridge Wells County Council's carbon reduction target. Then assess the options. What have you got available? What are the local public transport links like? Is your place of work accessible by train, tram, or bus, or other modes? And then start to think about your own toolkit. Could you do a travel toolkit yourself? Look at the measures in our business travel toolkit and then see if you can apply them to yourselves. Think about setting yourselves a carbon reduction target, again, as I mentioned, to link that with the net zero target of Tunbridge Wells, and think about a shift. What proportion of journeys, let's say 5% over a year, 10% over 2 years, what proportion can you aim to shift over a period of time? Then start to think about how you can implement that and assess the impact. Let's now look at some particular actions you could take. So a travel plan is this core kind of framework which will have everything within it. It's a strategy for managing the travel generated by your organisation. It involves doing this review of current travel and developing your own bespoke plan for employees and your company. It's suitable actually for all company types and sizes. I know often people think, well, I'm too small for this to be applicable. Really not the case. Any size company can write a travel plan. If you want a guidance, just ask us. We've got a template we can send you. Some local authorities may also provide this service, or there are other providers of specialist software and tools to support employers. Now, there's a nice case study here of the NHS. Of course, that's quite a large employer, but they have lots of different NHS trusts. The NHS itself, however, set as part of its commitment to reach net zero a requirement for trusts to produce green travel plans to promote sustainable commuting options to staff and patients. Lanarkshire, which is not the image demonstrated here, that's a different NHS trust, but Lanarkshire NHS Trust has just 12,000 people in their workforce, which is small proportional to the whole NHS, across 3 main hospital sites. They use Mobility Ways, and Mobility Ways, there's a link to at the end, which I'll put in there. They're really good people for car sharing, lift share, what they call the zero carbon commuting. And they've got a tool which helps you gain insight into commuting challenges, discovering through this tool that 96% of employees actually had a viable, sustainable option available to them, which came as a surprise. They then offered personalised travel plans for all staff, among other measures, and are already seeing improved productivity and well-being. So there's a really good case study of what you could do. On car rental and car clubs. Employees commuting by car can create really massive parking pressures for organisations. And I know Tunbridge Wells, of course, congestion is a huge issue, a day-to-day point of discussion, and we really don't want that to be the case. In addition to that, we've got the emission impacts, which is no good for anybody. Sharing car trips, therefore, is a really effective way to tackle this. It can take a number of forms, including lift sharing I've mentioned, and we'll come back to, also car clubs and car rental. So often people can see it to be a myriad of confusing things. Is it a car club? Is it a rental? Is it a lift share? There are these 3 different core types, if you like. Well, actually, there's 4. There's peer-to-peer car sharing, which is the 4th, through organisations such as Hire Car. But the 3 main ones we're going to look at are car clubs, car rental, and lift share. So car rentals and car clubs provide hire vehicles by the day or by the hour, giving individuals and organisations access to a car without being tied to ownership. All costs, including fuel, insurance and maintenance, are included in the hire price. And car clubs have been proven to reduce mileage overall, with 20 private cars taken off the road for each car club car in the UK. The average car club car also produces 27% less carbon dioxide emissions and an astonishing 89% less NOx, that's nitrogen oxides, than the average UK car, with a high percentage of electric vehicles. So replacing company cars with car clubs is a really effective way to cut costs, reduce the size of your fleet, improve utilisation and reduce emissions. There's a list of accredited car club providers at Como UK's website, which I'll share a link to at the end of this presentation. Como UK are the main organisation for shared mobility. That includes car clubs and indeed shared cycling. Many of those offer bespoke provision and platforms for employers. There's a nice case study here from Siemens. So a branch of Siemens replaced its 20-strong fleet with 14 dedicated on-site enterprise car club vehicles across its 2 sites in Lincoln and 1 in Aberdeen. Staff use a smart ID card to book the vehicles by the hour or by the day. And within 6 months, they'd cut travel costs by 28%. This was subsequently extended out to Hull and Congleton and Manchester for their sites there, and reduced Siemens car fleet by a whole third. In 2022, therefore, Siemens expanded access to the wider enterprise car club fleet to all of its 15,000 UK employees. Enterprise, who we would very much advocate for their work, also worked with more than 40 local authorities and other partners across the UK. For example, Tewkesbury Borough Council in Gloucestershire, who've introduced car club vehicles for their staff in 2020. That's reduced road travel emissions by more than 4 tonnes of CO2 within 6 months and has made annual carbon savings of around 8.6 tonnes. Now, Enterprise are really big players. They've absorbed some smaller car rental and car club operators over the years, and now they now seem to be the main player in many respects across the country. So I really would look to them in a similar sense, if you like, to some of the major providers of shared cycle that we'll come on to later on. So you've got car club, you've got car rental, and you've also got lift share. So that's very simply what it says on the tin. That is where people can share a ride for a journey that they're making in their own vehicle on a one-off or a regular basis. It's facilitated by platforms such as liftshare.com, and research from Liftshare has shown that commuters can save over £1,000 a year. And while 10% of workers do currently share a lift to work, 95% actually could, which would see 35% of all commuter emissions saved. So I'd really recommend that if you're not already looking into it and you feel like some of your employees might be travelling from the same or similar locations, that lift share is something you look into. In a very good case study, Arup and lift share work together to reduce car parking pressure at the Solihull office of Arup, the consultancy. The company employs 900 people there in Solihull, and they provided previously 320 parking spaces for a third of their employees a parking space. That car park was therefore, unsurprisingly, experiencing major capacity pressure, causing stress to staff. The company therefore thought, let's address this by exploring lift share. They used that app to enable staff to share rides and designated car sharing bays in a section of the car park. This has helped more than half single passenger trips, with 56% of staff now sharing a commute. Over 6.5 million miles have been not driven, and as we see in this case study, 1,500 tonnes of CO2 emission prevented, and staff have saved over £1.5 million in fuel costs. I think it's quite an extraordinary case study and an inspiring example of the impact that lift share can have in a short space of time for people travelling to the same site. Now, from car to bus. There are a couple of ways that you can address or explore better bus use for your business. We're going to look at supported bus provision and shuttle bus. So in some cases, staff may be willing to use public transport, but the provision may be infrequent or inconvenient. What organisations can therefore do is work with your local authority and bus operators to potentially explore adjusting services where possible to better serve the needs of the local workforce and the wider community. Local authorities have a non-statutory duty to fund local bus services where they're not commercially viable, but are necessary for social or economic reasons. And many local authorities do this. But in a stretched public funding environment, in spite of Campaign for Better Transport's best efforts to change this, which we continue to work on, sometimes it makes sense for employers to take the initiative and fund services. Now, we're not all Raymond Blanc, but I'm sure there are many fantastic chefs and caterers and hospitality teams here. There's a great case study there of Raymond Blanc actually stepping in to help fund the 46 bus in Oxfordshire for employees to get to and from his Manoir aux Quatre Saisons restaurant. That's actually been used by the public as well. So actually, if employers feel, well, we need a bus, our employees would benefit, but the wider community would as well, and you have the means to explore that, it's worth knowing that local authorities and bus operators are open to those discussions. You may think, oh, I can't get involved. You actually can. So do consider that and reach out if you think it would be welcome, if you can see an obvious corridor of opportunity. Another form of bus provision is shuttle bus provision. It says similar but different. So where there's no bus whatsoever, commercial or local authority supported bus service isn't an option. It is possible to provide a dedicated shuttle bus for larger organisations in particular. Recognise that this is probably easier for larger than smaller, but nevertheless it's really worth looking at. The routes can be bespoke, for example, providing full home to work services or collecting employees from a local train station, a bus stop or a park and ride. And for larger, we'll come back to that one in a second. For larger campuses, an intra-campus shuttle could also be an option. Companies can organise their own vehicles and drivers, or they could work with providers like Zelo to organise provision. Company shuttle buses reduce employee travel costs and stress, allowing them to prepare for the workday en route, increasing productivity as a result. They also improve punctuality by reducing congestion and the risk of employees being stuck in traffic. Additionally, they decrease the need for parking provision. So there are a huge number of wins to employers for exploring a shuttle bus. The case study here is Amazon. Now, you'll be able to look at these slides as this is being recorded. So I won't talk through all the case studies, but the Amazon fast track example has been extremely compelling and successful. And again, a bit like the supported bus provision case study for Raymond Blanc's restaurant in Oxfordshire, this also has been used by the public. Now on to cycling. So this is something which is perhaps more pertinent to smaller organisations and is an immediate kind of low-cost option for people to explore. And I know that in Tunbridge Wells there's a lot of interest in cycling, and now it's much more feasible than it has been for some time. I speak as someone who lives myself in quite a hilly part of the world, and I've certainly found with e-bikes it's a new world we're living in a wonderful way. And so I think cycling businesses in Tunbridge Wells are probably able to consider cycling in a way that you never were previously. So you might not have looked at cycle to work schemes in the past. They've been around for quite a long time, but again, just probably not the cultural thing, but the practical reality of living in Tunbridge Wells has made people think, probably not for us. It now can be. So what is the Cycle to Work scheme? It's a salary sacrifice employee benefit scheme operated by accredited providers such as cyclescheme.co.uk. There's a link that's coming up at the end of the presentation for that. Through this, employees are able to purchase bikes and accessories from a whole range of retailers, and the cost is taken out of their pre-tax salary directly through payroll, which means they pay less income tax and national insurance. That means actually that most scheme participants save between 32 and 42% on the cost of their bike and or accessories during the initial hire period. Another option is for employers to provide tax-free loans to the employee to buy cycling equipment or an annual season ticket, which is then paid back through salary sacrifice. I speak as a user of a salary sacrifice for a season ticket. I find it very, very helpful, simple, and welcome. Employers can also procure bicycles and make them available to employees either individually or on a shared basis. And to further encourage cycling to work and other forms of active commuting, employers can provide suitable facilities at the premises, such as secure bike storage and changing rooms with showers. That said, for shared cycle schemes, if there's a shared cycle scheme in your area or which could be brought to your area, that helps get around the cycle storage element. And indeed, e-bikes create a lot less sweat for the rider, so showers are not necessarily essential. Moving on from cycling, another recommended action is to look at, well, these are two different things, but they overlap to an extent: hybrid working and rail-first policies. So it's really important to emphasise that not all organisations and roles can facilitate remote working. For example, of course, healthcare and hospitality. Where this is possible, however, it can save emissions from business travel and commuting, and it can have wider benefits to a range of people, including single parents and all sorts of people who have domestic needs that can be eased by having flexible working. So being able to travel to the office more flexibly means that people can also make savings from travelling off peak if they need, saving on rail travel costs. Companies could also reduce the size of their office space if needed, cutting operational costs. Businesses have reported improved staff wellbeing and enhanced morale resulting from a better work-life balance. Now, I know this is a very live topic, and I know that especially 2025, the autumn, there are probably lots of employers that, have more sort of changing their policies and encouraging more people to come back to the office. And I really think it's important that we keep a balanced approach to this discussion, because it's a mixed bag. As I alluded to, there are really real and important benefits to individuals and families, which could be taken into account, and the environmental potential is huge. But it's a complex issue, and we want to get this right. We certainly as a public transport organisation, we want people on trains and trams and buses. So we don't just advocate staying at home, but it's really important to consider it if you haven't already, and how best to use it. I imagine that many people now are, as we are here today on Zoom, getting into the habit of using conference calls, as they used to be called, quite fluidly. But do consider how you can incorporate it into your travel plan, because it can be part of it, actually. Then on Rail First, many large businesses need to travel across the country and overseas, indeed, for businesses, and driving and flying can be the default mode of choice. Business travellers make up about 12% of passengers on average, but about 75% of revenue on certain flights. We know that train travel, of course, is much less polluting. That's 7 times less polluting than air travel. And while many people might assume that flying is faster and cheaper, travelling by train can often be the most productive and cost-effective choice for business purposes within the UK, and indeed, to an extent, within Europe. Our own research comparing the most popular domestic and near-European flight routes substitutable by rail shows that travelling by train can be cheaper or with no significant price difference than flying. When accounting for travel to and from the airport, pre-departure checks and passport control, the train is also actually usually faster than the flight. Going by train also allows people to use their time productively, using free onboard Wi-Fi or hotspot connections, and the average rail fare is more than returned in productivity gains. Therefore, for companies serious about reducing carbon emissions, choosing the train over flying for domestic and short-haul journeys is a simple and effective way to contribute to achieving your net zero commitments, the UK's and indeed Tunbridge Wells. Adopting a business travel policy where rail is the preferred mode where available is a really easy way to achieve this. You can see our Campaign for Better Transport's travel policy online as an example of having a rail-first policy. So then, practical actions on freight and deliveries. Now, this one may well be of interest to many businesses and organisations in Tunbridge Wells, and it's something which is developing a bit like e-bikes in general, developing really fast. And I think it's important in this business, if you like, or in this world of sustainable transport and sustainable business, to really get excited about things that are new and exciting, because the reality is we can easily lose lose our optimism when we look at the global picture and, the hottest summer in history and all the rest of it and think, where's the good news? Well, I'll tell you what, the good news really is e-bikes and e-cargo bikes. We're living through a period of very, very exciting change and development, and which is having hugely positive impacts for many, many people and regions. So e-cargo bikes, adopting these for deliveries in urban areas or for last mile transfer instead of van delivery offers a huge number of advantages to businesses large and small. And Transport for London's Cargo Bike Action Plan suggests that 1 in 6 van deliveries can be replaced by 2030. It's often quicker and more productive to use bikes for delivery. Cargo bikes use bike lanes and streets or paths where motor vehicles are restricted, so they're not held up by congestion. Drop-offs can be faster and less stressful, as cargo bikes can pull up outside the destination without hindering traffic, removing the frustration of trying to find a parking space. This means an increased number of deliveries can be made over the course of a day, improving productivity. Aside from being a genuine move towards sustainability and a demonstration of a company's commitment to achieving net zero, cargo bikes are a cost-cutting measure. They're also cheaper to purchase than most vans and have considerably lower running costs as they don't require fuel and only need to be charged. Cargo bikes, they're also an affordable option for small businesses and an attractive and practical choice for companies of any size. Now, the case study here, I will just read through the first of these at least, and again, please do have another look back at it later on. I think it's really inspiring, because people often think, oh, cargo bikes, that's not for me. So this is a really unexpected example. Shane, a self-employed plumber based in West London, uses an e-cargo bike for his business, Hammersmith Heating. He owns a van for longer out-of-town trips, but uses an e-cargo bike for 95% of his work. This saves him fuel costs and time and enables him to fit more customers into his working day. I have to say, I met Shane and he's a convert. He never would have thought of using a bike of any sort before e-cargo bikes were an option, and he was given a trial period and was completely converted. So I really, look up Shane, look up Hammersmith Heating, get in touch with him if you're cargo bike curious, because he's a really inspiring advocate. There's another case study there for Cargo Dale. I'd look into that as well, because Cargo Dale, that part of West Yorkshire, is very comparable in its hilliness to Tunbridge Wells. Then we get on to freight and deliveries. So this may not be as much of an option directly to businesses in Tunbridge Wells, but I don't know. It's certainly worth you being aware of the impact of and potential of rail freight, because we need to make the case for the sector. We need to use rail freight much more than we currently are. Across the UK, rail freight makes a huge contribution to the economy and environment. It produces far less carbon than road, and increasing the electrification of freight trains means rail freight is becoming much lower in its emissions. One freight train takes 129 lorries off the road, relieving congestion for businesses that need the roads. For businesses which regularly rely on container shipments, rail freight offers huge advantages. It's particularly efficient for long-distance deliveries, as one driver can move more containers with fewer rests. And containers are compatible with both road and rail transport. It means they can be transferred onto HGV trailers without the need to load or unload. Rail freight is more reliable, more punctual, and trains don't get caught in congestion as lorries do. Transporting containers by rail is also more time secure, with theft from rail freight containers very rare, considering the difficulty for criminals in reaching trucks and unloading trackside. So there's a nice case study in here for rail freight. A fashion company based in Cardiff called Peacocks uses a daily rail freight service operated by Freightliner from Southampton Port to the Welsh capital. Over 2,000 containers of clothes and accessories from around the world are transported every year directly to Peacock's distribution centre, employing around 600 people. This daily service enables them to locate their major distribution centres near to the rail hub, knowing that the service is environmentally sustainable and reliable. So that's it for a selection of practical actions from the toolkit. I heartily recommend that you all use that toolkit in designing your own travel plans. Before we finish, I'd just like to look at a regional case study. Now, having looked at things that you can do yourselves as a business, this is a bit more about how you can work together as businesses. And you're very, very lucky to have an amazing organisation like Amplifi bringing you together in this way, convening you in this way. So make the most of that, with them representing you as well to the council. It's an extraordinary, rare and fantastic opportunity. So how can you galvanise and maximise that collective power? We're going to look at Nottingham. So people may or may not have heard about the impact of the workplace parking levy in Nottingham. If you have, sorry for telling you things you already know. If you haven't, I'm really excited to tell you about this because it's been transformational. Introduced in 2012, Nottingham has the UK's first workplace parking levy. This is effectively a levy on parking for any employer of 11 or more employees. It's comparable to what every region in France does for their organisations as well, and works fantastically. In the first 5 years, it's increased business openings by 22%. Over 10 years, it's generated over £1 billion in direct reinvestment into local transport, and has ring-fenced revenue for public transport investment. Now, this is a levy which can be absorbed by employers or passed on to employees. Ultimately, the funds raised have had a transformational impact. Nottingham now has 2 new tram lines. It's got upgrades to its bus services. It's got award-winning bus services, many of them electric. It's got a very fantastic and refurbished modern railway station. Congestion has decreased significantly in Nottingham, and it's created a replicable model for other UK cities. Over that time as well, for businesses, it's created 23,400 more jobs in the city. There are 8,000 fewer unemployed people. 2,600 new companies have been created in Nottingham, and 67% of businesses that have relocated there cite the good transport links as a major factor in their decision. So this really is, at the moment, an outstanding example of what can be done when businesses say, right, we can do this together. We can take what might seem like a hit, but ultimately is an investment. There we are, 47% reduction in car traffic, 15% rise in public transport usage, and a huge reduction in transport emissions. I don't know if you've been to Nottingham lately. I certainly went back 2 or 3 years ago to meet the transport team, having not been for some time, and was frankly gobsmacked by the transformation. It really has been rapid, wonderful, and inspiring, and feels a bit like, as that picture shows, going to a lovely European city. So could Tunbridge Wells do something similar? Well, I think it's certainly not impossible, and I'd encourage you to work together. The Amplify model, of course, shows how business groups can convene stakeholders. You can create a united local voice around transport growth and air quality. And you can adapt your mechanism, or the Nottingham mechanism, to your context. It doesn't have to be a parking levy. It could be a payroll levy. That's the French versement transport. It could be tourism charges, land value capture, or eco levies. The most important thing is to remember the principle. It's locally raised, locally reinvested, it's transparently managed. And right now, do you know what? If you work with and lobby Tunbridge Wells Council to get behind this, government are quite likely to listen. Right now, I'd really encourage this during this 3-year period, or maybe 3 or 4 years of this government, there's an opportunity. We have got devolution rapidly rolling out. It's one of the most exciting things, apart from e-bikes, devolution. That's a good news story. So you've really got an opportunity to engage national government in something like this. I'd really encourage you, therefore, to build the case around growth and opportunity. Frame it as pro-business, about improving access, attracting new talent and new investment. You can see that there's a clear roadmap between what might be possible, the business case, the case for doing a consultation, which is often a good idea, not always, but in this case, certainly a good idea, and delivering within, as I say, this electric cycle. There's an electoral cycle indeed, electoral cycle. Pair it also with some of these support measures. So some of the things we've talked about, small grants for sustainable travel, cycle shelters, EV chargers. We haven't talked about EVs. That's, to be clear, electric cars. Often people think EV means just cars. There are other forms of vehicle. Pair it with measures like EV chargers and e-bikes, and think about some smaller campaigns, communications campaigns, do some workshops with Amplify and build trust and understanding of what could be possible. You know, make it your own. It's not about being another Nottingham, it's about being the first Tunbridge Wells. And finally, the ask really is, if not this, what else? Without these local revenue streams, where do you get your funding from? Transport decline continues. There's a harrowing stat there about the number of bus services lost outside London. This may be rectified with the buses bill, but not immediately. So Nottingham shows that alternatives are possible. It's an inspiring, slightly subversive example. Congestion reduced, economy strengthened, businesses attracted, public transport improved. So as I say, look to them for inspiration, but think what you can do yourselves. And finally, what more can you do? You can be a leading voice for change. You can join the nation's leading business groups, chambers of commerce, transport operators, and authorities in supporting our calls for what we call better transport for better business, through greater government investment, serious national and local targets for modal shift, and long-term local funding plans. If you like, we can provide you with template letters to send to your MPs, to Treasury and Transport Ministers. We recommend you make a habit of engaging with them regularly and reminding them of the importance of better transport for better business. And you can join local leading business groups in co-signing letters and representations to cabinet members and ministers, becoming part of an active national voice for change. It says that you can sign up to our pledge. Feel free. We have a better business pledge we'd love you to sign up to. Thank you very much. I've left some links here that you can follow up. That includes a link to our business travel toolkit, a couple of links on car sharing, a couple of links on cycle to work schemes, including cycle to work salary sacrifice, and indeed cycle saver for there's one there with a link to Lime, but it does other dockless shared bike schemes where you can get a salary discount on that as well. And there's a link to the Nottingham 10-year report that they call A Decade of Inspiring Growth in Our City. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Michael. So much to kind of cover there. And what I thought was really, really interesting to see is there are so many new initiatives, apps, websites that are kind of coming up that are aimed at kind of plugging those gaps between the different transport solutions that we have. So really exciting to see things like the car sharing apps and things like that. And I think we know that they're there, but having them all in one place to go and have a look at and see what is relevant and applicable to your own personal business reality, I think is really, really useful. So thank you for that. And then also the Nottingham scheme, just thinking about, how the money generated there has been earmarked specifically for improving the economic and transport opportunities in that city is very inspiring. And that, I know that you've kind of mentioned before, we have a very different government and council set up from Europe, but trying to kind of get to that point where, when we go on holiday and we think, wow, this is really fun to cycle around the city, or kind of, I can just get on the metro or whatever, somewhere like Lille. I don't know if there's a metro in Lille, but cycling around and being able to just get around a lot more easily, Nottingham showing it is possible in this country, and that's really, really inspiring. And then just the kind of what you're saying about knowing that you can have those conversations, you can get involved in being able to talk to your local council about these issues, as opposed to feeling that it's not within your capacity to influence in any way, is really interesting. And I suppose that's where I'd love to ask you a little bit more, and we can have a chat a bit more about how can we, you've already kind of given a number of kind of prompts, but how can we look at harnessing this community power that we have in Amplifi, but other business networks around the country as well, to start that process of looking at improving transport solutions? There's a lot there, but where would you start?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think what you've mentioned there about the reality of the fact that European models are often different, and we can't just say to Keir Starmer or Heidi Alexander, let's be France tomorrow. It's not going to happen like that. Even if we were to want that, or let's be Germany or Switzerland, or what the reality is, and I was at a meeting with the local government association recently, and the reality is, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, is that the approach we need to take is keeping up with the Joneses, effectively. It's healthy competition. And that means that we look at what Manchester is doing now. And you've mentioned Lille and other European cities. Nottingham feels like a European city now. Manchester, the centre, to me, if you know, St. Peter's Square, now feels like a European city, in the sense that it's got lots of intersecting trams, people walking, cycling, buses everywhere. It's really remarkable. And Manchester for a long time has had this looking enviously and admirably at London, saying we want London style, this, that, and the other. Andy Burnham has now said, well, no, it's Manchester style, and which is great. But they've leapfrogged Birmingham to be England's second city, effectively, due to their transport almost entirely. in terms of the economic growth, productivity, the house building, the businesses, everything's moved to Manchester, and that wouldn't be the case without Metrolink for a starter. So there's something, in the UK context, that's why I emphasised that Tunbridge Wells. If you look at Nottingham, then think, if you want to be another Nottingham, which I, in many respects, would advise because it's brilliant, but then think what's unique to us and how can we make our own thing, and say that there's a natural kind of knock-on effect there. And so that's in the global picture, that's the way to go. In terms of how you harness that community power and work nationally otherwise, I mean, I would really recommend that, obviously as an Amplify network, you find the listening voices in council, the officers, the cabinet members who are there, who are aware of their net zero target, and they're looking for ways to achieve that. Emphasise the fact that transport is central to that. Emphasise, obviously, as business groups, the impact on business and the fact that Treasury are going to love it as well at a national level, but also the quality of life aspect. I think there's something really vital there. The local plan will have so many things which need to be ticked, which could all be keyed back to transport changes, actually. So in terms of the health aspect of the local plan, medium-rise housing, walkable areas. Most of the local plan things generally key into transport improvement. So say to the council, this isn't just a transport thing in a silo. This is a whole quality of life piece, really. And obviously it's led as business groups, but the businesses, you can say this will actually have all these other wider socioeconomic benefits as well. I suggest that you run some local events, look at some trials. So see if you can do a collective trial scheme. Perhaps that's a lift share scheme. Perhaps that's cycle training session. So if there are businesses or employees who haven't biked before and want to try it out, invite someone in and have a workshop. There are lots of cargo bike organisations now who would be more than happy to come if you want to look at cargo bikes as well and have a trial period there. And again, that could be something where it's B2B. Actually, you could say, well, this is a logical opportunity for us to do things together in that sense, and connect with other regional organisations. I mean, of course, chambers of commerce, the FSB are very good. That's national organisation, of course, but Federation for Small Businesses, they have a transport champion who who's very, very supportive of positive engagement in transport improvement. Really make it known that there's a community of businesses in Tunbridge Wells which is doing what you're doing now. Because I mean, to me, I have to say, working for a national organisation, it's hugely exciting to know that you exist, that this body of businesses and Amplify, bring them together, exists. It's wonderful, and really the changes that we see at national level often happen in one area in the UK. It's often that knock-on effect, like we say, Manchester, taken a while, they've finally got multimodal ticketing, London style. Nottingham might be followed in some respects by Oxford. Tunbridge Wells could be next. It's that knock-on effect, but it is about those case studies and government having the belief that area has done its thinking on a local level. The same was true years ago of local sustainable transport funds that had to come from trying it out in one or two places. This is going back a long time now. So don't feel, I would say, powerless. Don't feel that, just because we're one area of the country, we can't actually make a difference. We have to depend upon centralisation. Absolutely not. And I think it's really key right now, actually, as I say, in this electoral cycle, to be aware of the opportunity of devolution. This government and many governments want further local powers. Actually, there's something really important in that. So feel capable, feel empowered, and feel that it's possible.
That's really interesting that you mentioned the devolution and the power of the council. I'm sure everyone knows, and I've mentioned to you, the Tunbridge Wells Council, for example, are very much looking at their sustainability targets and net zero, decarbonisation, but also circular economy. And I think all of those different subjects are touched by transport as well. And that connection of business and how we use all of those different facilities, and then how the council funds it based on the targets that they're setting, is a really interesting opportunity, I think. How have you seen businesses or business organisations start that conversation with councils from the perspective of we'd like to influence transport, but also we know that you have targets and you want us as businesses to achieve a net zero so that you can achieve your net zero. Have you seen other towns, cities have those conversations effectively?
Um, yeah, I would say that the chambers of commerce who've had effective impact on that. So
Mm,
um, So certainly in Oxfordshire at the moment, Oxfordshire is quite progressive, and the chambers of commerce and business organisations there have been good at engaging with the council in Oxfordshire County Council and making clear the benefits to them of transport investment. So I take some encouragement from them. Also, Bristol City Council, they've got very good business engagement as well with their chambers of commerce. So yeah, so I think it's certainly possible for there to be examples of positive engagement around the country that could give you some inspiration.
mm. Great, thank you. And then moving on to, you mentioned e-bikes and cargo bikes. It's a personal interest of mine. I've lived in London for many years before I moved to Kent, and I've just discovered the whole opportunity of e-bikes. And I think you yourself are a cyclist as well, so we can see the benefits. But quite often, I have conversations with people who don't cycle, who see the barriers instead. So the challenges to maybe feeling safe, or you mentioned, the comforts of cycling, maybe needing a shower or not wearing the right clothes. What kind of initiatives have you seen that are helping to kind of address those barriers that people are facing if they haven't cycled in a commuting manner until now?
Yeah, well, I think barriers, UK specific barriers to commuter cycling has been um, the perception that cycling is a sport rather than just a more efficient way of getting around. Um, and I appreciate that's particularly probably the case in in hilly Kent. You're going to have lots of people doing road cycling and things, training for Olympics and so forth,
Mhm.
and which is great, amazing. You get racing cars as well. I'd say racing cycling is probably slightly healthier, but I think that's a big challenge, is that there's a perception that it's about going fast and it's about the sort of extreme sports and so on. And so we need a cultural shift which acknowledges that it's a normal part of day-to-day life. It's become something which is going back um, to the end of the 20th century. It was just sort of associated with Amsterdam or places, students in you know Oxbridge kind of leaving their bike dangling off the railing, and why is it only exclusive to those people that it should be a normal part of day-to-day life? Maybe there's some things that didn't change for students in Oxbridge, but what they were doing and what people do in Amsterdam is what actually was quite normal, going back only to it may seem like a long time ago, but relatively mid of the last century. Chris Whitty, as Chief Medical Officer, has made this point in his annual address that there was actually 4 times as much cycling in the UK as there is now. So I think it's worth sort of having that long lens and that big view, and recognizing that there's been a big shift. It wasn't ever thus. It was not long ago quite normal that biking would be the first port of call, whether you were going to work, going to the shops, a postie, whatever it might be. There'll be more bikes. It'll be more normal to hop on one out the front door, down the road. That became much less safe straightforwardly because cars had such a rise in use and ownership, and it became less safe. And therefore now, it doesn't need to be all about segregated cycle lanes necessarily. There's a lot to be said for things like 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, which actually in parts of London and Wales have been very effective in reducing casualties and uh, you know, a lot of issues in terms of road safety, and in fact haven't slowed down traffic. Certainly, average speeds for buses in central London have been about 9 miles an hour since the 1970s. So a 20-mile-an-hour limit doesn't really speed. Yes, you often get sort of occasionally you get people say, "Oh, no, everything's much slower because of the 20-mile-an-hour limit." It really isn't. 20 miles an hour is more than fast enough to go on a bus journey or do necessary business travel. So actually speed limits and bus priority, and indeed tram routes. I'm not suggesting Tunbridge Wells will have a tram tomorrow, but these things can create safe environments for people to cycle in the road. So I think it's important that potential new cyclists don't think, well, I must have a segregated lane to have the confidence to cycle. If you're a new cyclist, have the confidence to be in the middle of the road. It's your road space. Tarmac, as some people may not be aware, tarmac roads were created by cyclists originally. Cars in the old days, cars didn't mind having a gravel track, but it was in order to make it cyclable that flat roads were created in the first place. So if new cyclists go out there and say, "This is mine, we were here first," and don't timidly cycle at the side of the road, because that's when it becomes dangerous. Make sure you're visible. But I guess I'd say you've mentioned e-bikes. I would really, if you feel like it might be too tiring, again, I've mentioned many times the hilliness of Tunbridge Wells. If you feel like it might be too tiring, it really isn't. Honestly, where I live is relatively mountainous, and even getting up the road to sort of friends and family used to not be bikeable. It now is for me. And so if you thought the journey wasn't possible, it probably is on an e-bike. So see if you can see if your employer can enable a loan or a salary sacrifice. Maybe as an organization, perhaps see if you can try one out for a while, because if you haven't tried an e-bike, it's a game changer. I'm lucky where I live, there are shared e-bikes, and we had a chat before. You said you were on holiday somewhere where there were shared e-bikes, and that was an eye-opener. Initially it's a bit sort of alarming how fast they initially go, but you get used to it. And I have to say, speaking as somebody who lives 5 minutes from a railway station, 10 minutes from 2 underground stations, 3 minutes from a bus stop. I've got a lot of those, but there's a lot of congestion. So actually the buses are often stuck in congestion. I use e-bikes all the time, shared e-bike. If it weren't for those shared e-bikes, it wouldn't be so easy. But honestly, it's been, even as someone living in a fairly well-connected area, it's been an absolute game changer. And the rates of cycling, the change in London, which used to be somewhere said, people would say, don't go there, it's too smelly and dirty and crowded. Central London now, the city of London, biking is the majority transport mode. Yeah, it's astonishing. Yeah. And a lot of that has been led shared e-bike providers such as Lime and Forest and Voy and people like that. It's hugely exciting. And I put a link there, that Second Link Cycle Saver has Lime, but also other people. If you live somewhere where there is shared dockless bikes, you can benefit from a salary sacrifice or a monthly saving on that as well. I don't believe there is shared dockless or shared docked bikes in Tunbridge Wells yet, but that if there isn't, and that's something businesses can see the opportunity of, make the case for it, because the development nationwide in the UK over the past 10-20 years has been extraordinary. And Beryl, I should say, are the main provider probably of docked bikes. They're not paying me to say that, but they happen to be doing the bikes for places as varied as West Midlands, Leeds, Brighton, Norwich. Lots of smallish and larger city regions now have docked shared bikes. Dockless shared bikes have been briefly controversial, and yes, there is an issue when they're poorly used, but on the whole, those providers such as Lime and Forest have been extremely good at responding to bad usage. And I mean, I myself, we talked before this call, you were on holiday, I think in Berlin, wasn't it? And,
yeah.
I was on holiday in France recently, and went somewhere where they have Lime and other shared dockless bike providers, and it's fine. They have a bay on the end of each street, and people use them, and it's really fine, and it's transformational. So if you haven't tried them, try them in whatever form you can. Lime, actually, now I mention it, we work with Lime, and again, they're not paying me to say this, but you can actually reach out to them, and we could put you in touch with Amplifi and Lime if you like. They might be interested in coming to Tunbridge Wells to do a trial. They recently went to Nottingham, and they're quite good at bringing a few bikes around to an area, and that could be a really interesting thing for Amplifi to lead on, actually. So I'd give it a try. And also, going back to the thing we started talking about, the kind of cultural perception thing, I think it's quite important. And I won't open the can of worms about sort of helmets and so on, because it's important that people feel safe when cycling, especially if they're new cyclists. But there is a perception that because you have to armor up to get on the bike, then it's fundamentally unsafe and it's a scary thing. In whatever way, whether it's wearing your work clothes or having a segregated space or having a safe provision for children, that could be like a sidecar or a cargo bike for kids with a safe space in the front. Whatever makes it feel normal for you, that's a good thing. And there are all sorts of different helmet, collapsible ones actually that you can put in your bag going to work that are quite good. And so all that you can do in your own experimental new cycling to make it feel like an extension of your body. I say that as an occasional cyclist, then I'd really advocate for that. Because as we all know, the places we go around the world where it's normal, whether it's Holland today, Utrecht, Amsterdam, Paris, Berlin, or Oxford, Cambridge, or England in the 1950s, it feels normal, and that's what we want to get towards. So sort of believe that that's the end goal, and that we can get there because we've got recent examples of rapid, inspiring change.
That's really interesting. And you've also mentioned previously there's a website called Cycle Safety, I think, that people can refer to get more information about being safe as they're cycling.
The Women's Night Safety Report was done by Lime. That's a really inspiring report because it demonstrated that for women in particular who are traveling to and from work or traveling home on their own, they felt significantly that shared e-bikes were the safest option for them, and they'd made them feel able to go out, travel to and from work on their own, and socialise on their own and get home safely. So that's a really inspiring report. If you're a woman potential cyclist, I'd look, or anybody, just to be inspired by the positive impact of Women's Night Safety. I'd look that up. Women's Night Safety Report, it's called. If you just look that up, you'll find it. It'll be linked to Lime and other people as well.
And we'll pop that in the follow-up email after the call as well. And I've loved this call because I think it's created lots of ideas in my head about things that can be done at a much more local level than I believe could be done. And as a user of all of this transport, I'd love to have more access to more of it. And if there's ways that we can make that possible outside of the big cities, I think that's good for everybody. And so thank you for creating the toolkit. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for all of the work that you're doing and continue to do. I look forward to hearing about the next Nottingham, hopefully being in the south of the country, maybe.
The first Tunbridge Wells.
The first Tunbridge Wells. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael. It's been great to meet you, great to hear from you and everything that you're doing. We have recorded this webinar, so this will be available on YouTube, and we'll be sending out the link in our email as a follow-up. And in that email, we'll also link to some of the other resources that Michael and I have mentioned throughout our conversation. If you want to join Amplify, as I mentioned, you can go to amplify.tw. If your business is interested in getting involved in any of these subjects, please get in touch so that we can build our community and see if we can have a bit more impact on topics such as sustainable transport. But thank you very much, Michael, and I wish you a good rest of the day, and I hope to see everyone again very soon.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Amplify. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.